Coming up on this post-sprint and qualifying Brazilian Grand Prix F1 update.
Yes, you could tell that Gianpiero was just a little bit frustrated with the way Max was coming back at him. While it looks like, bearing in mind what's happening in qualifying, Max Verstappen's title chances are about to go up in smoke this weekend.
Saturday, São Paulo shock as Oscar Piastri crashes out of the sprint before Max Verstappen suffers a rare Q1 exit in qualifying, leaving Lando Norris on Dreamland. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding and I'm delighted to be joined as always by lead editor Ian Parkson. Ian, quite where do we begin? I think for the sake of us and also our viewers, let's start with the sprint race and then we will discuss qualifying at great length. We probably need about an hour for both given how much happened. And I think it's important we begin where we ended Friday's F1 update regarding what was a severe weather warning in place. Thankfully, the forecast and what happened was nowhere near as bad as was forecast, but still, the track, particularly the start-finish straight, was very damp. The rest of the track was pretty dry for the sprint race, but also the curbs were particularly wet. As we found out on lap 7, a really bizarre moment where within a matter of seconds, Oscar Piastri, Nico Hülkenberg and Franco Colapinto all dipped a tyre on the curb on the inside of turn 3, sending them helplessly into the barriers, bringing out a red flag due to barrier repairs and the recovery of the cars needing to take place. What a strange few seconds we had.
You've again summed it up perfectly, Nick. You've left me very little to talk about. Once again, you keep doing that, pal.
Getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be no need for me at this rate. You keep going on like that. As you say, the rain didn't come in terms of on the event itself. However, as you pointed out, it did play a part and it lent itself to those 3 extraordinary crashes that took place one after the other in literally a matter of seconds. It was all fairly straightforward from the start of that sprint race. Lando Norris got away cleanly, Kimi Antonelli second, Oscar Piastri third, and the race was settling down. Max had made a good start, managed to get past Fernando Alonso, and as I say, the race was settling down. And then on lap 6, pretty much all hell broke loose. As you say, bottom of the center S, going into turn 3, Oscar Piastri just dipped a tyre, his front left wheel on the curb, and it sent him into a spin and across the grass and into a barrier on the other side of the track. What was quite remarkable was the fact that literally within a few seconds, Nico Hülkenberg followed, and then Franco Colapinto did exactly the same thing. And the onboards of both cars, it was the same as Oscar, just that front left wheel, it caught that curb where obviously there'd been some standing water that had gathered, and it was enough to send all 3 spinning, crashing out into the barrier, red flag, 28-minute delay, and then the rest of the sprint race unfolded, and Lando Norris just continued on where he'd left off before the red flag and canceled on to victory and a 9-point lead going into the Grand Prix weekend, or going into the Grand Prix itself, should I say. Now, that's the biggest lead he's had this season. He actually led the championship standings across the first 4 Grand Prix weekends, but never at any stage was his lead 9 points. So this is the biggest cushion he's had going into the Grand Prix on Sunday at Interlagos. And given what happened in qualifying, which I know we're going to discuss very shortly as well, it could be a lead that is extended further at the end of the race.
What was interesting in the sprint, and we can discuss this, for a brief moment, because it also is very relevant for the race, in that it was Kimi Antonelli on the front row alongside Lando for the sprint, and to give Kimi some serious credit, pushed Lando right until the very end, got within DRS range in the final laps, and Kimi also starts on the front row alongside Lando for the main race on Sunday. The young Italian looks like he could potentially ruin Lando's party.
he's got a shot. He's got a second shot. As you say, didn't quite take full advantage of the first one for the sprint, but nevertheless, what a performance across this Grand Prix weekend from the 19-year-old rookie. You've got to remember that. It's still a rookie season for him. It's been quite the roller coaster. We've gone through it before. That great first period of the season with those flyaway races, did well, appeared to be gathering ahead of steam, scoring good points to Mercedes. Then this almighty catastrophic dip across the middle part, across all those European Grand Prix, punctuated only by his podium in Canada, another flyaway race, of course. And now here we are back in the flyaway races, and he's performing superbly again. So he's on the front row for the Grand Prix. That's his highest grid slot for a Grand Prix this season. He's also the third youngest driver in F1 history to land front row grid slot. So that's quite a feather in his cap. But now it's a question of, as I say, he's got that second bite of the cherry. Can he do anything to get past Lando Norris early on? It's a very short rundown into turn one, as we know here at Interlagos. But nevertheless, it's still an opportunity, and it's going to be about tyre management. We know that. What are the tyres going to do across the weekend? It's a new surface. We saw with Lando Norris towards the end of the sprint, after the red flag phase, he'd switched to a new set of softs, but those softs were starting to wear at the rear, and that's what allowed Kimi Antonelli half an opportunity here or there to try and get that win that it was never really going to come, in all honesty, because Lando just had too much in hand. The tyres didn't degrade as much as Kimi would have liked, bearing in mind Lando's message. But here we go. Kimi's got this, as I say, this second bite of the cherry. Can he take it?
George Russell completed the podium in the sprint with Max Verstappen in fourth. And let's discuss Max's sprint race first of all, because he started in sixth, as you pointed out, quickly overtook Fernando Alonso for fifth. When Piastri crashed, that elevated Verstappen into fourth, and that was that pretty much for Max in the sprint. Had no answer for Norris, no answer for the Mercedes, and was pretty heated once again over the radio.
It was a struggle, wasn't it? And you could see that with Max. It's been a struggle all weekend long, even more so with the qualifying, which again, we're going to come on to in a moment, folks. But yes, it was quite clear from one particular conversation that he had with his race engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, that Max's frustration was beginning to start to get the better of him. He just couldn't find any answer within that car. Gianpiero made it clear, look, Max, didn't quite say shut up to him, but look, we're going to do absolutely everything that we possibly can. These are the options I'm giving you. Let's see what we can do. It was quite a pointed remark from Jean-Pierre, more pointed than I've just aired it there in those few comments that I've just made. But yes, you could tell that Jean-Pierre was just a little bit frustrated with the way Max was coming back at him. But these are the frustrations that occur over a Grand Prix weekend. Max had come into this Grand Prix weekend on a charge. He'd reeled in both McLaren drivers. It was a further opportunity to potentially make inroads again into the leads of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, 35 and 36 points respectively going into that sprint race. And for whatever reason, whatever's gone on with that Red Bull, lack of grip, lack of balance, just all-round lack of performance. And as we mentioned after Friday, Max describing his car as completely broken and undrivable. He couldn't get the grip and balance that he wanted out of it. Well, it looks like, bearing in mind what's happening in qualifying, Max Verstappen's title chances are about to go up in smoke this weekend.
Yeah, Max now goes into Sunday 40 points behind Lando Norris. To quickly go through the rest of the points positions from the sprint, Charles Leclerc was 5th, Alonso 6th, Lewis Hamilton 7th, and Pierre Gasly in 8th. There is one final talking point from the sprint to discuss before we go into qualifying, and it's a pretty big one, quite literally. And of course, we saw one of the biggest crashes of the season, one of the biggest crashes I think we've had in recent years, for the home hero, Gabriel Bortoleto, on the final lap of the sprint whilst battling Isaac Hadjar and Alex Albon. A 57G crash, yes, you heard that right, at the first corner. Ian, I mean, he said himself he was lucky to walk away from it without any serious injury. It was a seriously nasty one.
57G, just to give people some perspective on that. If you all remember Max Verstappen's crash at Silverstone 2021 British Grand Prix, that was one hell of a shunt that Max took into that barrier. That was 51G. So Gabriel Bortoleto has crashed today 6G more than Max, and he just got out of that car as if nothing had happened, as if it was just getting out of the car, as if he pulled into the pit lane or the garage or whatever. It was quite staggering, the fact that he managed to escape unharmed in any physical way. I mean, he mentioned before that in his post-pen quotes, sorry, quotes, post-qualifying quotes from the pen, just to correct myself, post-qualifying quotes from the pen, that whenever he gets out of car anyway, he's always got little aches and pains, but that's what being a Grand Prix driver is all about. More often than not, he's mentioned he's been carrying the shoulder niggle as well, which he's never mentioned before. And he was fully expecting that to be a lot worse. As it transpired, that wasn't the case. Just nothing. He was given check over. The routine checks, of course, as always takes place with crashes like that, take place at the Circuit Medical Centre. Franco Colapinto did the same after his crash earlier in the sprint in his Alpine, and given the all clear. So much so that he came very, very close to competing in qualifying. The team did, the Sauber team did an almighty repair job on that car in a very short period of time they were given between the end of the sprint and start of qualifying. It was all suited, ready to go, but by his own admission, in all honesty, he felt that the team needed another 25 to 30 minutes more to make sure that that car would be absolutely perfect for him to try and qualify in. If he had got out, it really would have just been a case of just giving it a run through to make sure the car was actually okay to go into the Grand Prix with on Sunday. As it was, very sadly for all the fans that had turned up to see Gabriel at his home Grand Prix this weekend. He is a Sao Paulo boy, he is a Paulista, and unfortunately they saw him crash and they didn't see him in qualifying. Hopefully for those fans, he can turn it on tomorrow in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was a Herculean effort by Stake to get Gabriel's car so nearly ready for qualifying, given just, I mean, it was an entire car rebuild effectively, just how much damage he sustained. Right, shall we now talk about qualifying? Because, I mean, we've got just as many shocks to go through. Let's begin with probably the biggest of the day, a double Red Bull Q1 exit. The first time that's happened since 2006. Yuki Tsunoda will line up in 19th, provisionally of course. Max Verstappen in 16th. Max said himself after the sprints that Red Bull would make changes to the car. Changes you'd have thought would have made the car better, and in his words, yes, the ride was better, but zero grip. That's his first Q1 exit since 2021. This is, I mean, Max's title hopes are hanging on an absolute thread.
Yeah, so obviously, as I mentioned, Red Bull had obviously struggled in practice and in sprint qualifying on Friday with balance and grip. So what they did, they used Yuki Tsunoda pretty much as a guinea pig for the sprint race. They trialed a new rear wing on the back of Yuki's RB21 because the area where Max had struggled in particular in sprint qualifying was through the more twisty second sector. Where you require a greater degree of downforce to cope with those corners. So they put the higher downforce rear wing on Yuki's car for the sprint. As it turned out, that didn't work either. So armed with that knowledge, at least, and with that data, they then tried other areas of Max's car. And unfortunately, as Red Bull team principal Laurent Mekies was very honest in conceding, they took risks, it didn't work, or they didn't work. And you can understand Red Bull trying to take these risks. They'd basically got nothing left to lose. They've tried all they can. He said there, Laurent said that they just have not been happy all weekend with that car. So do not be surprised, folks, on the back of Max qualifying 16th. And it's only the second time in his 228 Grand Prix start career that he has failed to escape Q1 on pace alone. It's the 8th time overall in his F1 career, twice on pace, 6 times due to power unit penalties. And the last time that he failed to escape Q1 on pace was 2017 China. So we're going back 8 years. So this just goes to show how bad it has been for Red Bull across these 2 days. And as I was building up to saying, do not be surprised, Max Verstappen fans, if Red Bull decide, given the lack of performance in this car at the moment, that they've taken these risks, they didn't work, that they will take the car out of Parc Fermé, A, give it a new power unit, because we know that can work wonders around this circuit, and B, do whatever changes are required again to hopefully give Max the grip and balance that he requires from that RB21. Max conceded in his post-qualifying media session that this was it now. His title chances are absolutely gone. You can't expect a repeat of what happened last year, first and foremost, when he came from 17th on the grid to win that Grand Prix. As he pointed out, the circumstances then were very different given the wet conditions. It's not expected to rain at all tomorrow across the Grand Prix morning and during the Grand Prix itself. So Max is going to have to rely on a better balanced car with more grip and potentially more power if they do decide to put a new power unit in the back of that RB21.
To put it short, Max needs quite literally the drive of his life if he wants to stay in this F1 title fight. Speaking of, drives of their life, Lando Norris is having the weekend of his life. He has, and I'm going to get this correct, topped free practice, sprint qualifying. He's then topped Q1, Q2, Q3, of course the sprint race. He's done it all so far. This weekend, he does start from pole position, continuing what is this magical weekend for him. But he made it difficult for himself in a lockup on his first hot lap in Q3 at the first corner. Left it all to do on the final lap in Q3. As he put it himself, he gave himself unnecessary pressure. But whereas in the past he's crumbled under that, that's not happened this time, and it's not happened in recent races either. We're starting to see a Lando who can deal with that pressure he puts himself under sometimes.
It's a very different kind of Lando Norris now emerging compared to the Lando Norris we saw over the first part of this season up to the summer break, you could say, where he was making these little mistakes, but they were proving costly. And of course, the flip side of that was that he was often berating himself, beating himself up with his comments post-qualifying, post-race, whatever it might have been in whatever session that he might have made those particular mistakes. Now, as you say, this is a different Lando Norris. This is a guy that's on a great run of form. He's clearly high on confidence. He's clearly feeling great within himself. And it has been so far the most perfect weekend for him. As you said, Nick, top practice, topped all 3 sprint qualifying sessions, won the sprint race, topped all 3 qualifying sessions for the Grand Prix. Can he now go on and complete the total perfection of adding the Grand Prix victory to that roster of success? Yes, he did make it very difficult for himself. But the only mistake he's made across all the running on track this weekend has been at the start of that first qualifying lap in Q3 into turn 1. Big lockup, cost him about 0.4, half a second, and that meant he was 10th on the timesheet off the top 10 going into his second run. But he delivered when it mattered most, quickest again by almost 0.2 of a second over Kimi Antonelli. And Oscar Piastri, now his biggest rival for the title, quite obviously. Despite that, given where Max is, of course, on the grid, and his title chances now almost certainly going out the window, Oscar starts 4th. He's got Charles Leclerc ahead of him. Now that's a surprise. Bearing in mind, we've seen Lewis Hamilton in the other Ferrari struggle again. Knocked out in Q2. He starts 13th after starting 11th for the sprint race. Not a great weekend for Lewis, but for his fellow British driver, he's on course at this rate with the points he's racking up, with the performances he's putting in, to go on to become the latest British driver to win the Formula One world title.
Before we bring this video to an end, to very quickly go through, the provisional top 10 on the grid for the São Paulo Grand Prix. It is Lando Norris on pole position ahead of Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc in 3rd, Oscar Piastri 4th, Isaac Hadjar in an absolutely brilliant 5th for Racing Bulls, George Russell in 6th, Liam Lawson also doing a super effort for Racing Bulls in 7th, Oliver Behrman an equally amazing result for Haas in 8th, Pierre Gasly in 9th, and Nico Hülkenberg in P10. And on that note, note. Ian, amazing stuff as always. For those who have been watching this F1 update, please be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below your thoughts on qualifying and where you think Max Verstappen will recover to in the race on Sunday. I've got a sneaky suspicion we might see something a bit special. Be sure to join us after Sunday's race as we will dissect it all. See you later.
Thanks as always for watching and listening, folks. Take care until we see you again post Grand Prix.